All right, so we've teased this one on social media. You've seen it across the board. We talked about the puck off Lagerdale. We talked about the coffee porter on Saturday. If you were in the lives, you've seen these beers in person and me taste testing them. Absolutely delicious. So, want to say a huge shout out to Boxing Rock Brewing for sending those over. But now they sent somebody in person to speak with. We're sitting down with Dan MacKay tonight to talk about the Colorado Avalanche. You see it on his hat. You know, obviously, we're Leafs fans on this podcast. And then we're going to talk about the brew process as well, what goes into it, what he does, and obviously what inspired the Puck Off Ale. I want to talk about this stuff. So let's get it rolling. What's going on, my friend? Welcome to Offside.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me, guys.
Not a worry at all. So let's jump right into her here. What got you into wanting to brew? And for the other part of things too, where's the passion come from as well?
It's actually kind of a lucky coincidence. I was living overseas in Australia for a few years, and I happened to come back home, and I needed a job. And my sister happened to work at the brewery, just as an assistant. And lo and behold, the position opened up for me pretty quickly, and I've kind of learned everything on the fly ever since. So the passion, honestly, it just comes from doing it every day and realizing it's a really fun thing to do. It's every day is different. Every day is completely different, and that's kind of what makes it fun and exciting.
Well, for sure. Well, the one that caught me off, and I saw this in the store, and I had to try it. I'm a big craft beer guy, so I haven't been able to get out to the local breweries as of late to actually go pick things up. I usually travel around and do it. But I saw the Puck Off Lagerdale sitting on the shelf, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a big hockey guy. I got to try this." So I try it, love it. Put up the post. Obviously, everything starts happening. We start talking. But for you, the Puck Off Lagerdale for you guys, brewing that and all that stuff that goes into it. How did that come about? Obviously, the name, everything like that. Obviously, I know you don't have all the say in everything, but obviously you're a part of brewing it and bringing things together. Big hockey guy yourself. So what do you like about the Puck Off Ale and all that stuff?
What I like about it, firstly, it's clean, it's crisp. It's sort of like a craft beer version of any of the domestic beers anyone drinks.
Yep.
You go to a sports bar, you order a Bud or a Keys. This is kind of essentially our take on it. It came about, we were talking about it, like what can we do? How can we reach out? How can we reach other people? Domestic beer is like, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's a high percentage of, yeah, exactly. It's a high percentage of the beer drinkers in Nova Scotia drink, the big ones, Bud, Keys, all that stuff. So there's obviously some untapped potential there. So why don't we try it ourselves? Me and my co-brewer, Nick, he's the head brewer at Boxing Rock. We just sat down and said, hey, like, what do we want? We kind of figured it out. Emily came up with the recipe, one of our engineers and co-owners, and we've kind of gone from there. We've adapted a little bit and made some changes, but I think it's right where you'd want it to be. It's clean, it's crisp, it's clear, and it tastes great. So very easily accessible for any beer drinker.
No, it's definitely great. Actually, my father-in-law, he's one of those guys you just talked about that likes domestic beers, and I've given him a few craft beers over the years, and kind of gives me the weird look, like, nah, this ain't the real beer that we drink. And I'm like, well, no, this is where beer is going. I gave him this one. He actually really, really liked it. He likened it. So it's like you said, he actually compared it to Labatt Blue. He said, that is a very comparable thing, and it's the one he likes to drink. So I was like, well, they're spot on the money. So you saying that really drove home what he said. What made you guys want to focus kind of on, I guess, with the name hockey? I talked to Emily a little bit about it. She said they really wanted to tap into that market. Obviously, Nova Scotia's huge with hockey. Nathan MacKinnon, Sidney Crosby, the Mooseheads, you name it. It all goes into the name. But for me as a hockey fan, grabbing that beer, it's great because you feel like you're sitting there and you're having something that's relatable to the game. So is that something you guys were going for, the relatability, with the game and growing the game and then growing the beer around that?
Yeah, absolutely. The tie-in with hockey comes a lot from Emily being a hockey mom, and obviously, her kids are playing hockey all the time. I'm a big hockey fan, so when she proposed, let's kind of do it this way, absolutely, like, that makes sense to me. And there's plenty of people out there that moms and dads and whatever that take their kids to hockey, and I'm sure they all enjoy having a beer. Why can't we kind of focus on those guys? And like you said, it's Nova Scotia, right? It's small town. It's craft. It's it's everything you kind of really want it to be for that whole thing. I think the whole puck off thing, it kind of started as almost not a joke, but like kind of a joke with Emily's kid's father, and he's British, and that's what he used to think a face off was called when he first came to Canada. So
That's cool.
when you get a cool name like that, and you see that, there's probably a lot of people we could kind of reach out with just branding it via hockey, for example. And I mean, this time of year, like you said, it's a nice, you sit on the couch, you can have 3 or 4 of them, watch a hockey game, whatever, or you can go to a sports bar. I think it just fits perfectly, and couldn't ask for much more, to be honest with you.
Now you talked about the taste and obviously having it kind of dialed in right now, what it is and how it's going. Do you foresee or have you heard from anyone that maybe this needs to be tweaked or that needs to be tweaked? And with recipes in general, are you guys always constantly actively, adding, changing, trying to make it taste better, differently, or just to your own taste? Because I mean, for us drinking it, we expect that's just the way that it is. That's the way that it tastes. And obviously the puck off for me, delicious. The coffee porter, absolutely good. This weekend I'm cracking into some Vicar Cross. So, I'm trying all these different ones. But for you guys, is it constantly an evolution and changing things and what you hear and what you don't, or once the recipe's set, you guys kind of leave it where it's at?
No, absolutely. It's a constantly evolving things. Like every batch, we want to make them scientifically as exact and precise as possible, but things happen, right? Like
Yep.
90% of our job is cleaning and sanitizing. So, that's a huge portion, and small little mistakes can do that, can affect those things. But we try to keep, right to the point. But with this beer in particular, I can say, we've made some slight adjustments, made it a little more crafty. It's not just, some grain and some water and here you go. We've adjusted sort of, the mouthfeel of the beer, so it's a little bit easier to drink when you pull it as a pint. There's a little bit more aroma to it. It's not just a bland beer that's in a can that's for hockey, right? We try to still put that craft spin on it a little bit. So yeah, right now I'd say, like you said, it is pretty good, and it always does. With the other beers, of course, we're always changing, especially the hoppier beers. I mean, you can always adjust hops. Add them to different times of your boil to get different bitternesses. It's such a scientific process that I even didn't really realize 5 years ago when I started this. But yeah, it's always evolving, and that's kind of the fun of it. Like I said, every day is not the same, and that's what makes it fun. You kind of roll with the punches and try to produce the best beer you can.
No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And that's the way it should be, obviously, experimenting and trying new things and coming up with new recipes too. And
Absolutely.
getting something new and tasty to drink. The next one I want to talk to you about right quick too is the coffee porter. I tried that on the weekend, and I didn't look down at the percentage of that one. So I was drinking it, and I was what, I think 3 or 4 puck off in at that point, and I jumped to the porter to do the taste test and enjoy that one. Didn't realize it was 7.3%, so a little bit more of an uptick. And by the end of that one, I was pretty happy about it, to be honest. But I'm a huge coffee beer guy. I search it out. I look everywhere for it. So when I was just talking to Emily about it, and she said, "Oh, hey, we have this one. We'll send some over." I want to know from you, like you like the coffee beer too, is from what I'm told anyway. What draws you to coffee beer? And is this the only one that you guys are going to make, or is there more coming with the coffee flavor?
Yeah. So funnily enough, I was thinking about this today, in preparation to talk to you. It's just, sheer luck that it's also one of my second favorite beer that we produce. But I always liken craft beer to coffee in general, because everyone has a different taste in coffee. There's even just at Tim Hortons, how many different versions of a coffee can you order, and everyone has a different one. It's the same thing with craft beer, right? You're not going to love every beer, but you can appreciate what's going on in each one of those beers and pick up some flavors and stuff like that. So I think just naturally there are two things that are very similar. Even you brew both of them, for example, right? Like you brew a coffee, you brew a beer. But it's one of those things that they're very close together, I think, just in general. But for some reason, when you put the two together, me personally, I think it's just the perfect marriage of two kind of, combinations of things. You get the strong coffee and the bitterness in there from the beer, a little bit of sweetness on the top of it. Yeah, it's just, I love coffee, I love beer, so it seems like a great idea. I'm not sure who actually came up with the idea of doing it originally. It was probably Emily or Henry, but it's, again, one of my favorite beers. As for the future, we had a beer that we did in a small batch in our test kitchen in the city. right around the local source area on Agricola there. It was called Inverse, and I thought that was a really cool beer. Logistically, I don't know if we're going to do it again, so I shouldn't talk about it too much here. But it was a beer that looked identical to this, puck off, crystal clear, and not much haze to it. But it was the most coffee, intense beer that I've had in a long time, and it was just amazing. Coffee porter. Luckily for us, it's got a base beer to it that we add coffee to, so it's a little bit easier to create that on a large scale as opposed to something like Inverse that, just the cost alone to produce a giant batch of that to send to the liquor stores could be quite costly. So for now, we have to go with the coffee porter. But it's actually, the base beer was a beer we had called Tan Toaster, which was the Baltic porter. Which funnily enough is, you hear porter, you think of like kind of a dark and deep and heavy winter beer kind of thing, it's actually a cold fermented beer. So it's very similar to puck off, and that's where you get the clarity in puck off and the clean, the crispness. It's fermented. The yeast is cold. It wants to huddle together. So that was a porter that was very similar. It's very smooth and not a typical porter. So to put something in it like coffee beans, obviously, there's all that room for all that flavor to go because it's sort of a thin, crisp, clean beer. So I think that's what really brings out the coffee and coffee porter, and what makes it so great, is, and we use there, I believe it's from a local, I can't remember off the top of my head, it's one of the local coffee places that we actually get our beans from. And yeah, so we try to do everything local as we can. A lot of our beers, we have blueberries or cranberries, and some of our sours, they're all, sourced as locally as possible, obviously, with some limitations. So it's just another cool little part of each of the beers we do.
Well, no, going local, obviously being a local company and supporting local yourselves, that's absolutely huge. Now you got me wanting this Inverse beer from you guys. I want to try that coffee one. You're talking about how good it is. Maybe that could be a special summer, hey, small batch brew on the, down at the waterfront or something from Boxing Rock. And I'll have to keep texting you and putting the gears to M2 to see if maybe something can come of that, because obviously coffee beer around here there's not a lot of it. Everybody seems to have one, but it's such a limited run when they do it. And like you just said, I mean, maybe it's the cost factor, and there may not be a huge market of coffee beer fans. I know everybody that I talk to, when I say I'm excited to drink the coffee beer, gives me the eyes like, well, what are you talking about? But again, it goes back to appreciating craft beer. And I mean, for me, I love traveling around when we didn't have the pandemic going on with my growler, and just going to different places and trying different beers and trying them all out and enjoying everything. Now you kind of have to, I guess, take a shot in the dark and go grab a case of something and hope that it's good, because you can't no longer really just go get a taster or anything like that from anywhere around here anyways. I don't know if it's different down Shelburne way, but yeah, that used to be the fun of it. You get to taste everything and see everything, and like I said, fill up your growler. I mean, if that Inverse was available, I would have filled up 10 growlers and probably kept it and drank it all, because I, like I said, I'm huge on the coffee beer. The Keese one that they have out, I know they brew it here, but it's not exactly, I don't know, it doesn't have the same pop, same flavor that I'm looking for. For you guys, like I said, I drank it on the weekend, absolutely loved it. Had everybody in the chat wanting some, so it was a really good time, really fun time. So going into what you do on a day-to-day basis, you look at brewing these two beers here. Is there another one that comes in third, or one that you guys may be working on that really whets the appetite and you're like, this is something that's going to be fun and huge? Or is it just one that's just a regular favorite that you like going into too?
Yeah, again, like I said, it's completely dependent on taste, and I could probably tell you every beer, but just off the top of my head, like you said earlier, the Vickers Cross Story, that's, it's been a staple since I've been there for 5 years now. We've always got multiple batches of it on the go. It's very hefty. It's a very potent beer. It's a double IPA, so it's got that high alcohol content, and you might want to be careful on your intake of it. Stand up periodically. I'm gonna make that
one my first beer Saturday night when I do the taste test on the live. I'm gonna make sure
that's what I tell everyone. You always start with it. At least it's not a good one to finish on, because you might have a bad evening afterwards. But yeah, that's always a good staple. And I mean, like our Hunky Dory, we always push our Hunky Dory because it sort of is like the flagship brand or the flagship beer for Boxing Rock. And I've always loved that one as well. Coming up, we do have one now. It's a stout. It's our Patricius. It's kind of the ode to St. Patrick's Day kind of thing. So it's a
Okay.
nice winter beer. We've been fortunate enough to it's selling pretty well. It's doing pretty good. So it seems like a lot of people are really enjoying it right now. So I'd say that's probably the one currently that I would be picking up.
Nice, nice. So for you guys coming up, obviously the holidays, big season for craft brewing for everyone local, obviously. Are you guys going to be brewing right through the holidays? Do you guys shut down? What's the situation there for you guys?
Yeah, so it's kind of dependent on the liquor store, and they kind of do a little bit of a shutdown around Christmas. So we do kind of slow down a little bit, but slowing down is getting a bunch of beer ready just so it can ferment over a month to
Yep.
just have it ready for the start of the new year. So it's slower, yes, but not as slow as you probably would think. And a lot of other stuff we have to do in the brewery and inventory and stuff like that. So that kind of keeps us busy over this next month or so. But we'll probably go till the 23rd or 24th. Take 3 or 4 days off and then just kind of ease back into it. It's usually what we do. So
All right.
makes the holidays, you're still at work, but they're not hard days. So it makes it a little more manageable for sure.
Well, I mean, when you're brewing some of the best beer going on, I don't think it's a big problem either. Lots of
Yeah, well,
smiles on
thanks.
people's faces, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly it. And that's why you do it, right? It's you're making something that hopefully somebody else will enjoy and will continue to enjoy. So that's the goal.
No, I want to know how many beer you had to enjoy to get over the loss last week. We'll switch gears now. We'll go from beer to hockey because hockey and beer go so great together. Shout out to the puck off Lagerdale. Obviously, it fits right in what we're about to talk about. So you're a Colorado Avalanche fan. Everything was coming together to talk last week. Obviously, we couldn't get that down. But now you've had some time to digest what happened in that game. I want to ask you, you watched Toronto come out and play that game. I know that your starting goaltender did get hurt. Nate McKinnon just coming back off of an injury. But the Leafs were coming back off that West Coast swing. Obviously, your body clock's got to adjust too. So it was set up more for the Leafs to have that loss kind of handed to them. And I really thought they were going to. Obviously, the old adage for the Maple Leafs, when old players come back to play them, they score on them, they light them up. So it always ends up being a problem. For you watched that game. What did you think, A, of the Leafs, and B, what do you think so far, Nazem Kadri, on your Colorado Avalanche this season?
Yeah. Well, I guess like anywhere else in Nova Scotia, I get a lot of Leafs talk and social media and stuff. And my fiance's father, so my future father-in-law, is actually an Ontarian, moved to Nova Scotia, diehard Leafs fan as well. So yeah, exactly.
Same here.
So not that I haven't really followed Toronto this season or other seasons, but probably not as much as I'd like to. So it was good to see them. And, it's kind of cliche at this point where this is our year with Toronto, right? Like, so this is our year. We got the piece. And it, you hear it, you constantly hear it. And I kind of almost went into that game thinking that, not really paying attention to them. I know they were kind of doing well, but I really like your guys' goalie, Campbell. Like,
How can you not like Soupy? Big smile on his face.
yeah, even personality aside, if you just took him as just a goaltender, like he's the sweetest dude, it seems like in the media, which just makes him even more endearing to everybody. But like, I honestly think, and maybe I'm a homer, but I think if he switched the goalies in that game, I think the score is switched. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, for sure. That's why I said with Kemper not being in
yeah,
that, guys.
and it's an unfortunate thing with Colorado right now. It's like, third string goalie that we've gotten from Buffalo that, you only want him in there maybe 1 or 2 games, right? And he's
Yeah.
backed up by an emergency backup. And then you got a 21-year-old kid flying from Colorado to possibly play on a back-to-back. And it's every year, it seems like with Colorado, these last few, especially where we've been kind of a contender, it's the goalies, right? Like, Grubauer would, he'd give us some good nights, but then he just has some atrocious nights. I don't know if Darcy Kemper would have made that game any better, but it
He
I
couldn't
hate to
have
say it.
hurt, that's for sure.
No, that's true. It probably wouldn't have been any worse, but I really felt like they were going to come back there. I think it was in the second when, at the end of the first, I saw that they got that last second goal. I was
Yeah,
like,
it
oh,
was
okay,
three.
that's
I think it was
something.
3-1 or whatever. They got it like
Yeah.
last minute of play.
And I think they got another one kind of fairly early in the second there. And I was like, okay, this is something, but it was that 1 or 2 shots that, maybe Johansson, he did his best. Obviously he's great for what we've got him signed for, but
Yeah.
I feel like if he makes a couple of those saves, like I said before, though, that game is completely different. So I wasn't too worried. I'm not too upset about it. I know there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
So for that part of it, I'm okay with it. As for Toronto, I honestly think you guys have a really good team this year. And hopefully, I know Mariner kind of has something going on now. Hopefully that's not a long-term thing. But
4 weeks.
is it 4 weeks? Okay. Well, so yeah, that's not great, but not horrendous.
No.
But what I've noticed a lot about Toronto in watching them in recent years is, especially where you didn't rebuild, you retooled over the last couple of years. I think there's not many teams that could say they're so comparable to each other that Colorado and Toronto are. High skill, high speed, a competent defense, competent goalies on both sides. It seems like really good power plays. Like they're very comparable teams.
Yep.
So I really like where Toronto's going right now, and that kind of pains me to say, but I really do. As for Kadri, unfortunately, I love him. I've always loved him. Like you take the good with the bad with him. Gabe Landeskog is the captain of my favorite team, and if I'm going to defend Landeskog, I have to defend Kadri, and I think they're both great players, and they're just put in bad situations sometimes, but. Unfortunately, I think Kadri's playing himself out of Colorado right now, unless he takes a real sweetheart of a deal to keep that team together.
Yeah.
And, McKinnon potentially, he said whether he does it or not, he might take one as well. And I mean, Makar's contract it's still $8.5 million, but I mean, I feel like he could have went for 10, but I think they're all kind of on that same page. I just hope the money will work. I'd love to have Kadri as a second line center. You can see what he's doing right now. He's fourth in league scoring right now.
Yep. Right up there.
Without McKinnon for 90% of that, on the power play. He's playing with Val Nichushkin and Andre Burakovsky. We're no slouches. Val Nichushkin might be my favorite player this year, to be honest with you, just the way he's been playing. But Burakovsky, he can score, but he doesn't have absolute studs with him on that second line. He has friends.
No, he's making the line go himself. He's driving that line.
Absolutely. And I tell you what, on the power play where they have him, as a Leafs fan, this. Pick your poison. Do you want Makar to score? Do you want McKinnon to score? And if they're firing at the net and Rantanen's on the other side with that one-timer, there's a high chance that Landeskog or Kadri are going to clean something up or tip something in front of the net. So, yeah, exactly. And that's kind of been the MO for Colorado this year. It seems like when they're really firing, they're firing shots, and that's what's happening. It's not the, the perfect, beautiful goal. So I like the way Kadri's been playing. He seems to be playing more of a pass first this year, even though he's got like 10 or 11 goals. A lot of 2-on-1s. He's going for the pass, and it seems like every time he does it, Nichushkin or Burakovsky or whoever it is, they're just putting it in because that's what they're there for. So love him. Hopefully he stays in Colorado. If not, again, this will sound bad. I'm not too worried. I do like the depth that Colorado has kind of at the center position without some of the injuries right now. Obviously
he young guys coming up too, like Alex Newhook and stuff like that. That'll definitely fill in that void too if Kadri does walk. And we had Adrian Dater on last week too. He's a big Colorado Avalanche reporter, and he's talking about the fact that you're just like you said, Kadri's kind of playing himself out of town, having such a great season. And he said, "But are you shocked? It's a contract year. The guy wants to get paid. This is probably his last chance to get paid." We joked around with Dater and said, "Hey, is he going to come back to Toronto?" He said he wouldn't be surprised maybe at the very tail end of his career if he does end up in Toronto for a little bit. But from what all he's heard, Kadri loves it in Colorado, loves playing with everybody. Also kind of likes it's a little bit quieter than playing in a media market like Toronto, where you're the sole focus most of the year when it comes to, anything going on. So he gets to play his game. The thing I want to ask you about Kadri, though, he's kind of not has a reputation, but it just seems like the refs really like to give him the gears. And if you look back at his career when he was with the Leafs, before this started happening, he actually was a guy that would draw, just like Michael Bunting is right now in Toronto, would draw a lot of penalties against the opposing team. But as soon as he started doing this to the refs about penalties, is when it seemed like the reverse happened. Now everything's called on him. Even last year, I think he got, who was he, 5-minute major or 10-minute misconduct or something for barking or just chirping or whatever. And he's like, now I'm getting penalties for talking. He's like, so I'm wondering for you, do you guys see that too? Because I watch, the Kadri highlights and things like that. I'm like, some of the things that go against him, I'm like, if that was anybody else, I don't think it would be the same discipline happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. I listened to some of your interview with Data. It was really good, by the way. It's I always like listening to what some of the Avs beat reporters have to say, and stuff like that. But uh, on the altitude broadcast that I watch, which is the the home broadcast for the Avalanche, they always jokingly say, and I've been saying it as well in tandem with them, is can we track how many times Kadri gets thrown out of the face-off?
Yeah.
And can we find out how many of them, okay, he's infringing here or there, absolutely throw him out, get the next guy in. But sometimes they just throw him out in an important offensive zone face-off, and you have a winger taking it all of a sudden. So it seems like that's the way it goes with them. Unfortunately, like I said, the good with the bad, that's sort of the bad, what I'm talking about. Obviously the suspensions and stuff like that as well, but that's sort of the bad.
Yeah.
It's as a team as a whole, I think it's more problematic for Colorado, and Kadri and Landeskog are kind of the focal points of it.
Yep.
But you might see it a lot with Toronto's games. These high skill, high speed teams, they take a lot more penalties for embellishment, or they get thrown out more because they're chirping or they're complaining. But in reality, it's because when it comes, the end of the year, playoff time, they outskill and they outspeed guys, and they get tripped, or they get, there's clear penalties against them.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then they don't get the power play, which their team's built around. Like, they're built around the skill of drawing penalties. Like, that is an art. What anyone want to say, if you can draw penalties, and Kadri can, and McKinnon can, all these guys with speed, they draw the penalties. But when they're not getting called just because of game management or whatever it happens to be, and then they go and lose, and they say, well, what do we do differently? Well, maybe I shouldn't have been hooked. Maybe I shouldn't have been, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just so frustrating.
Right now, we talk about skilled players and penalties. Matthews has not drawn a single penalty this season.
That's crazy.
You look at Austin Matthews, and you look at the other night. I don't know if you've seen the highlight of Pierre Dubois absolutely ragdolling him and dragging him around the ice until the fact he finally has to respond while the ref is standing right there, and they both get a penalty. My mind was blown. I was like, what did Matthews do? He had to respond. Guys,
exactly,
rubbing his face into the ice, but he hasn't drawn a penalty this season. And you talk about high school guys. Look at McKinnon last year in the playoffs. There was no, or not McKinnon, McDavid didn't draw any penalties either in the playoffs. And the league's like, oh, we're building it around skill. We want our skilled players to excel. Well, if you want them to excel, you have to call it like it's supposed to be called, during the regular season and in the postseason. And I guess now, I mean, because Matthews, he obviously in Colorado, I think it was famously, did the goal call, insulting the referee basically because they took back his one goal. Yep. So now you wonder, is he under the microscope? And kind of like Kadri and kind of like Landeskog, it just seems like the star players that have the guts, the fortitude to say something against the referees end up being the ones that kind of get punished. And then the NHL comes out and says, well, no, we want our star players to do well. We want them to excel, but it doesn't seem to happen that way at all.
Yeah, exactly. And has that not been the knock, as a Nova Scotian with Sidney Crosby? I know there's a love-hate relationship for him. I love him. I think, he's one of the greatest hockey players ever. But like they've called him a crybaby for years, but all he's really doing is saying, hey, like that is a penalty. Like, call the penalty, right? Like, we are built to, we train, we compete, that if you're going to do something illegal, we should benefit from that. So yeah, I think it's more of a problem as a whole, and really think that high skill, high speed teams are suffering because of it. And I think if you look back at the Western Conference for the last 3 or so years, it's kind of become a meme, second round Colorado, much like the Leafs in the first round. If you look back at who they've ran into, well, Vegas. Well, what did Vegas do to Colorado last year?
Yeah,
the exact same thing. They just pummeled them, and penalties weren't being called. The years before that, San Jose, the exact same thing, pummeled. Game 7, Game 6, Game 7. So it's one of those things that I always wonder, and it kind of frustrates me. Like, imagine if we'd have those extra power plays or 2 a game in the playoffs. Do you think Colorado wouldn't have won a cup by now? I personally believe they would have, and I'm sure Toronto would have gone much, much farther with a lot of these calls.
Oh yeah, well, with the power plays for sure. And I have no ill will against Colorado Avalanche. They're my actual second favorite team would probably be them, or I know I'll get a lot of flack for this one, but the Philadelphia Flyers. I like both those squads. Obviously, I like Philly because of Rick Tocchet back in the day, but I love Colorado for the longest period of time, because obviously guys like Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic, you go back to Ray Bork, you look at all the different players that were on that team, and when they won the cup, Rob Blake, I have a fond memory of that, and I loved it, and I love watching the new guys come in. Also loves the fact, Solani and Korea came in, $1 million deals each to go play with the Colorado Avalanche, to play together. Those things are cool, right? So, and then Patrick Waugh, ice in his veins, obviously, everything going on with the Avalanche there too. Then came back as the coach. What's not to like about the Avalanche? And I want to see Kadri win the cup, maybe not before Toronto, but I definitely want to see him win the cup. And, I think he has a real good opportunity and a real good spot with the Colorado Avalanche. And I look at guys like Nate MacKinnon. You obviously want to see a good Cole Harbour boy, good Nova Scotia boy win again. And it seems like the Colorado Avalanche are really dipping into the Maritimes anyways within their roster. A lot of different players. Obviously, they lost Graves to New Jersey in a trade, but they definitely have a lot of maritime flair in there. And maybe they should be the Boxing Rock team. I don't know.
I think unofficially they might have to be. Me being, probably the biggest hockey fan at Boxing Rock, I think they're unofficially. They must be. But yeah, Colorado, like you said, and you have Newhook, who's from Newfoundland. Justin Barron was just drafted, or the Mooseheads, captain of the Mooseheads from Nova Scotia. Ryan Graves, like you said, it's kind of hard not to cheer for them. And surprisingly, I see a fair bit of Avs gear out in the wilds, when I'm, in Halifax or in other places. So it's good to see that it's not just the same, no offense, Habs and Leafs jerseys everywhere. But it is, I think if you're a Nova Scotian and you're really looking for a team to cheer for with some sentimentality to Nova Scotia, more than enough Nova Scotians have been on that Colorado team, or ex-Mooseheads for that matter, have been on that Colorado team.
Definitely. So, yeah. There's nothing wrong with cheering with Colorado. And you will say this, when I moved here in 2003 from Toronto, to find another Toronto fan was a hard thing to do. And then when they went on that losing streak for the longest period of time, I felt like a lone ranger because I didn't see any Toronto gear. It's all Boston and Montreal out here. A few New York Rangers fans sprinkled in, Colorado fans. When Winnipeg came back, obviously they were the big push too. But now that Toronto's finally doing okay, I could see other people wearing their gear. They feel okay to wear it out in public again without getting ridiculed. So yeah, man, it's fun. I mean, obviously Nova Scotia's kind of known for two real things, and that's hockey and brewing good beer. And we got a good combination going with you, obviously, and the team over at Boxing Rock brewing great beer. The Puck Off Lagerdale is going to be great to celebrate the season with. Hopefully either you or me get to celebrate our team, hoisting the cup. And obviously there'll have to be pictures of the Puck Off Lagerdale beside the Stanley Cup because of what it represents if Colorado wins it. And that's definitely got to happen. I can see it happening. Why not?
Absolutely. I got to work some magic. I got to start messaging some people and figure out how we can get, some puck off up near the Stanley Cup when it comes back eventually to Nova Scotia. So,
hey, I'll put it out here first. I think that Colorado will win the cup before the Leafs do. A guy like Nathan MacKinnon, that guy just drives and doesn't want to quit. The only knock that I have for Mac for the Colorado Avalanche is sometimes he tries to do too much on his own. He's got to realize he's got a good supporting cast around him. Guys like Cale Makar, guys like Gabe Landeskog, Kadri, and you talked about Nutushin and Burakovsky, everybody down the lineup, right? So let's hope they can win the cup. Let's hope it's Leafs Avs during the cup. Then I'll have to have you back on, or we'll have to have some sort of viewing party and just celebrate the right way.
For sure, man. That would be awesome. I think.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time, jumping on. Thank you for brewing tasty beer. Make sure everyone get out and get your Boxing Rock Puck Off Lagerdale. Make sure you get your coffee porter as well. You can see it on the screen. Everybody's got it. Absolutely delicious. Check out Boxing Rock. Amazing people over there. Can't wait to have Daniel back on, maybe later in the season, see where his Avs are at. But, sir, thank you for brewing good beer and cheering for a good hockey team.
Thank you for drinking good beer and cheering for an okay hockey team. Appreciate you having me on. Thanks a lot, man.
No problem. This has been Offside Hockey Talk, where hockey comes to